Finally, Clemson Sports Talk has come back to Drive Time. Hello, everybody. Lawton Swan back in the saddle once again. It is the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk for you each and every afternoon as you make your way around the great state of South Carolina and beyond, listening to us on spectacular radio stations like Fox Sports Radio 1400 The Midlands, Sports Radio 100.1 The Fan in Florence, and 9:20 a.m. in Manning. Good to be with you here on a Friday afternoon, a beautiful Friday, been a beautiful week really here in the state of South Carolina this week. I don't know, if you've been traveling at all or to and fro, but man, where I am, I mean, it has been gorgeous all week long. 803-450-0086. That's your number, 803-450-0086. We'd love to hear from you here on the program today as we get set to get things up and rocking and rolling, not only on Facebook, but also on Periscope, also on, YouTube as well. Man, the other day had an interview that was playing here on the program, and secretly it was recorded. You probably knew that, though, after watching it. But I stepped out and went into my kid's bedroom, and honest to goodness, looked great. It looked great on the television set on YouTube. So I told my son, I said, listen, dial it up, Mace. Let me check it out. Coming up on the program today, Richmond Weaver, Clemson's greatest games. I'm sure you are by now very aware of that series. We'll catch up with Richmond coming up in just a little bit, hour number 2. Clemson Tom going to be a part of the program, and it is always good to get a chance to talk a little bit about the Clemson Tigers. And this week, the matchup that they will be talking about on Clemson's greatest games takes us back to 2012, I believe. It's Clemson and NC State, and what a game that was. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit here on the show that shakes the Southland. Now, if you don't follow us already, I would encourage you to follow this show. If you have never shared this show before, I would encourage you to share it. If you're watching on Facebook, like the page or subscribe or, all that fancy stuff that everybody always talks about getting people to do. I hope you will consider doing that. If you are a part of the program and hanging out with us really for the first time today, welcome. And we try to have a good time here. This show is always been a program that's of the people, for the people, and occasionally even by the people. So with that being said, I am excited to have you hanging out with us, and we do enjoy each and every opportunity to talk with you. So, all right, today's topic leads us with a conversation of the magnitude of scheduling right now in our country from the college football perspective. Yesterday, as you are aware, the MEAC decided that they weren't going to play football in the fall. That affected SC State. We know over the past several weeks, the Ivy League has decided that they are not going to be playing football in the fall. We know that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are going to be playing only conference games this year. And so it's really begged the question from a lot of people's standpoints, what happens to the ACC? What happens to the SEC? And what happens maybe ultimately, and we'll throw it in there, the Big 12? The reason I bring this topic to you today is the fact that while we are still very uncertain of what the future will hold with college football, we do know that answers have to come. And for Clemson fans and South Carolina fans, there is an unbelievable amount of, what's the word I'm looking for here? There is an unbelievable amount of worry, concern, etc., that the longest running non-conference rivalry matchup in the history, or at least currently in college football, will come to a conclusion. Now, we've got an article up on our website right now, clemsonsportstalk.com. And that article obviously dives into some of these things that we're going to get into today. So feel free to head over and read those items. One of the things I will tell you is that from the standpoint of the ACC and the SEC, there is there are great reasons to try to work these things out to make sure that these schools stay able to play. Clemson, South Carolina, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Kentucky. And so these two leagues, and at least at a minimum, 8 fan bases, have an incredible amount of interest in making sure that they are on the field playing. Now, to you, Florida, Florida State, to you, Georgia, Georgia Tech, and to you, Louisville and Kentucky probably don't mean a hill of beans. But if you are a Tiger or a Gamecock, that matchup in November, every single season, whether you are 0-11 or 11-0 heading into it, has significance. And so what we may actually see take place without the Big Ten, without the Pac-12, and we're seeing more and more reports of this, and you can head over to ClemsonSportsTalk.com right now and read our article called Fall Football, Should the Palmetto Bowl Be Played Early? And I'm going to pose that question to you here today as well. As a matter of fact, we will put that poll up over on Facebook momentarily. Would you be in favor of Clemson and South Carolina opening the season with each other? And the reason I ask that is because, and really I want to specify in this year, 2020 only. Because one thing I think we have to concern ourselves with is the unknown and the uncertainty of what it would look like. And I'll publish that poll now for you. What would it look like in November, given what we've seen? There's way too much uncertainty that even if you had a schedule in front of you, that you would be able to be assured that those two teams would square off in the final game of the regular season. And while you are so accustomed as a human being to patterns, consistency, things being the same. Listen, there is a portion of you, and I've told this story before, and it is an honest part of this story that I will tell here. But if this show ever went away, there would be a portion of you that would miss it simply because you're accustomed to hearing me talk during this hour. And there would be a portion of you who would miss it because you really like the show. Now, the latter half of those people, I understand some of you might disagree and say, Swanee, nobody likes your show.
And I'm saying, woo, right here.
Okay. But from that standpoint, I will tell you, we are creatures of habit. And playing South Carolina outside of November, just for the sake of getting to play them this year, for many of you, would shift that conversation. In a regular year, there's no chance anybody, very few of you, especially very few of the orange-shaded, orange Kool-Aid drinking Tiger fans would say, yeah, line me up with the Gamecocks week 1. Gamecocks, on the other hand, might take that. They might take that at this point. And I think it kind of depends on who you are in the relationship. If you're the team looking for your 7th consecutive victory or your 7th consecutive win in the series, if you're a team that's at the top of college football, it may or may not really matter to you. But from South Carolina's standpoint, to enter a game 0-0, to enter a game in a week where Clemson could potentially make some mistakes and maybe they don't make a little later in the season because of just I'm going to call it a lack of continuity at that point in the year, and I think that might be a fair way to say it. But you've got the wrinkles that you work out, and there are things that you do that maybe don't work out in week one, or maybe a guy like Travis Etienne with all the experience in the world, really the first time taking contact, maybe he puts the biscuit on the ground a couple of times. I mean, there are a lot of reasons if you're the South Carolina faithful that you go, let's play it week one. Let's play it week one. Let's give our best shot against the Tigers. But more importantly, in 2020, the reason this conversation should be at least talked about is because of how important that game is to the overall streak that exists, how important that game means, what that game means to Tiger fans and Gamecocks. And it's not as if these two teams take a year off. It's not as if that means that, well, Clemson's winning streak is snapped because they didn't get a chance to play. En contraire, mon frère, they still very much have that opportunity to continue that streak a year later, but you'd like to still play the game to keep the unbroken streak of amount of games played with South Carolina. That longest running non-conference matchup streak is what you really seek to keep alive. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe Michigan and Minnesota and the Old Brown Jug, I think that's the longest running matchup in the country, and they are in the same conference. But the longest non-conference matchup, Clemson and South Carolina, could a partnership between the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 lead to it? Now, why would you say, Swanee, is the Big 12 attached to this conversation? Why would that league be a part of it? Well, first and foremost, from the ACC and the SEC standpoint, we mentioned the 8 teams. You've also got the fact that the regional appeal and matchups and the lack of travel distance that takes place between those teams exist. But then you've also got, from the Big 12 standpoint, you've got a couple of teams right now in the SEC, Texas A&M and Missouri, who are both former Big 12 members, who could very easily match up with one of their former rivals from their previous conference. Geographically, for LSU, a matchup against a Big 12 team might make a lot of sense. So, we could go on and on and on about all of the different aspects of this that would make sense, from the ACC-SEC relationship, the SEC West relationship, potentially with the Big 12, the fact that the Big 12 is not a huge conference, and they only play, 9 conference games with the 10 teams, I believe, that they've got in that league. So there's a lot of maneuvering that would potentially need to take place and could take place if you open it up to multiple teams. We also got to mix in Notre Dame coming into the Atlantic Coast Conference, which throws things off just a little bit. And then there's this. Gary Stokan, who is the executive director, I believe is his title, of the Peach Bowl and the Kickoff Classics and everything that goes on. And typically next week we'd be interviewing Gary Stokan at the ACC Kickoff, or at least this year, perhaps even interviewing him virtually. And we'll reach out to Gary and try to get him on the show that shakes the Southland soon. But one thing that has gotten overlooked by a lot of people because of COVID-19 is the fact that this season at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, they were going to be doing something pretty incredible. They were going to be putting on 3 games in 7 days. September the 5th, out of the Big 12, West Virginia was taking on Florida State out of the ACC. September the 7th, Georgia out of the SEC is taking on Virginia out of the ACC. And September the 12th, North Carolina out of the ACC taking on Auburn out of the SEC. Why this is important is because if we talk about the teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference that have matchups with opponents in the SEC, this, features a couple of those as well, even though Georgia's already got a matchup with Georgia Tech, even though Florida State's already got a matchup with Florida. So it would make sense to try to keep those games alive as well. and try to figure out how to work out everything else and just allow the Pac-12 to play in their own conference this year, to allow the Big Ten to do their own thing. But if we do get fortunate enough to have college football with minimized schedules, lower amounts of games, this is something that can keep several of these games alive, that can keep many rivalries cooking, and then ultimately would hopefully open up more opportunities to prove yourself out of conference, which is always going to be a question if we have a college football playoff. In addition to that, if these three leagues pulled this off, you could make the argument that any belief that a larger expanded playoff because of sole conference play across the board, to a degree, could be nullified. Because you could say, hey, you guys might have chose not to play Big Ten, Pac-12, anybody else, but we did. And so 3 out of the 5 Power 5 conferences are going to continue to play potentially cross-conference games, thus maybe making the argument harder for Ohio State to prove their worth because they don't have a game against Oregon. Maybe making the argument for Oregon because they don't have a game against Ohio State or Southern Cal, etc., whoever comes out of the Pac-12 or the Big Ten. Maybe this diminishes their argument for a spot in the college football playoff.
I guess that's your theory.
It's a theory indeed, but it's a possible theory that I think we could see maybe playing out. But from the standpoint of Clemson and South Carolina, in 2020, would it behoove these two schools to play each other early on to get that game in, to just be able to line it up and knock it down? And if in week 2, COVID-19's all over college football and you can't play, hey, oh well. At least you got to play the South Carolina Gamecocks. 803-450-0086. If you're watching this show right now, do us a favor. There's a share button somewhere. Whether you're on Twitter, you can retweet it. If you're on Facebook, hit share. Wherever you are, whenever you are, please share the show. Help us continue to grow. Get more Tiger fans in the fold. We are on in the Midlands, the PD, and the Low Country, and we are working to come to the upstate. And if we can sneak even further into the Low Country, down into the Charleston area, we will do that too. We want to infiltrate, man. We want to be like a virus. We want to be the Clemson Sports Talk virus. We want to infiltrate your market, your area, and your radio station, and bring more Tigers into the fold. I've seen many people commenting already over on Facebook. We've got votes coming in. Would you be in favor of Clemson and South Carolina opening the season in 2020? We'll get to those votes in just a little bit. But our good buddy Richmond Weaver is right around the bend here on the show that shakes the Southland. And Richmond, my man, is a tremendous part of a great series called Clemson's Greatest Games. This is a series that takes a look at the matchups that help push the Tigers to the top of college football. It is 12 episodes. I believe this week's episode with Clemson and NC State is the 7th such episode. So that's coming up in a lot of markets across the state of South Carolina. And we'll talk with Richmond Weaver here on the show that shakes the Southland in just a few minutes. Don't forget Clemson Tom. Maybe not your voice of the fans, but a voice of the fans joins us in hour number 2 as well. We hit a quick break here on Clemson Sports Talk. And again, Richmond Weaver, my man, Richmond Weaver, on Twitter at Richmond Weaver. That's easy. He hosts Rich Take on Sports. He joins us right after this. So make sure you keep it locked on the show that shakes the Southland.
Here's your chance to win $1,000. Text the nationwide keyword LOVE to 200-200. You'll get a confirmation text and info. Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. That's LOVE to 200-200.
Now, Columbia's most dependable traffic. Sponsored by Pope Davis Tire and Automotive. Home of the best tire prices in Columbia. Guaranteed. Fox Sports Radio 1400 traffic.
Our first look at the road this afternoon shows a wreck on Tunach at Valhalla. Also an accident on Persimmon at Bar Road. I'm Rob Sanders. The 103.5 FM WVOC traffic tip line is 343-1055.
This report is sponsored by Compassion International. We're all feeling the weight of COVID-19, but for kids in poverty around the world, things are becoming desperate. Join Compassion International and provide for a family in poverty. Make your one-time $40 gift. Text HOPE to 83393.
Group training is a fun, accountable way to get in shape. I'm Coach Stewart of Dynamic Health and Fitness. Come train with one of our special groups today. We will focus on giving you the support you need to get in shape. We use the Dynamic Mob, featuring intervals of cardio, functional training, and strength training to change your lifestyle to make you healthy. Get started today at any of our locations in Lexington or West Columbia, or call 803-408-4060 or online at dynamichealthclub.com.
When you get in your car, you need the best directions to get where you want to be.
Will arrive at your retirement in 8 years.
The same is true for your retirement. You need a voice to guide you along the way. Join Pat Struby for Save Your Retirement with Pat Struby. Pat's 18 years of experience can help make your retirement journey feel like a drive down easy street.
Arriving at your retirement.
Saturdays, 6 a.m. on Fox Sports Radio, and Saturdays at noon and Sundays at 9 on 560 WVOC for Save Your Retirement with Pat Struby.
At Stanley Martin Homes, your life is our blueprint. For over 53 years, Stanley Martin has been building homes to fit your lifestyle. Visit any of our local models for a self-guided tour or schedule a personal appointment with one of our neighborhood sales managers. Summertime is the best time for moving into your new Stanley Martin home. And now you can design your house with a click of a mouse online at stanleymartin.com. An equal housing opportunity.
At the Samuels Reynolds Law Firm, we've seen how terrible accidents turn lives upside down, and we're proud to be the lawyers our clients depend on during their toughest moments. I'm Jason Reynolds. Call me when your family is faced with any serious injury or death.
And I'm Stephen Samuels. When you're hurt at work, I go to work, getting you the medical treatment and workers' compensation you depend on. We have the experience and passion you need when you need it most.
Samuels Reynolds. True injuries, true lawyers. 779-4000.
Roxanne Watson is on a mission.
Hello, how are you doing today?
She wants more people to register as organ, eye, and tissue donors.
Are you an organ donor?
Yes, I am.
Yay. My goal is to sign up the most people in the United States.
What drives her? Roxanne's own life was saved through the gift of a heart transplant, made possible by an organ donor.
I decided that day that I was going to devote myself to the cause of organ donation and signing people up and honoring my donor by doing that.
Now she's back to health, and she's a powerful force helping to save lives every day through her work. Imagine what you can make possible by leaving behind the gift of life.
8 people can be helped with the major organs, and up to 50 people can be helped with a little bit of everything. And when you think about it that way, that you could help that many people, it's amazing. It really is.
Learn more and sign up as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Go to organdonor.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
Now, back to Clemson Sports Talk with Lawton Swan on Columbia's home for the 2018 National Championship Tigers, Fox Sports Radio 1400.
It is the show that shakes the Southland on a Friday afternoon. You're getting accustomed to it. We recap and talk about the upcoming matchup on Clemson's greatest games, which can be seen in a market near you. Richmond Weaver, one of the producers of that series. Richmond, I'm going to tell you, man, it has been my favorite series, and that includes the Michael Jordan documentary this summer, keeping up with everything that you guys have done with this fantastic retrospective for Tiger fans. This week, Clemson and NC State from back in 2012. And for Tiger fans that may not remember that game specifically, boy, did Taj Boyd have himself a day.
He definitely had a day, and that is such high praise coming from you, Mr. Swan, in reference to Clemson's greatest games, especially comparing it to The Last Dance. Now, I'm a big Michael Jordan fan, so that has a special meaning in my heart. But I agree with you here. The Clemson's greatest games, it just means a lot to so many fans, and including Clemson grads, obviously, as well. And when you relive the 2012 NC State game and what Taj Boyd was able to do, you're just in one of those moments where you see some of these elite athletes when they get in the zone. 8 total touchdowns, 5 passing, 3 rushing, 426 yards passing, 103 yards rushing for Taj Boyd. This is just one of those games when you look at it just from an athletic performance, a quarterback performance, whatever, you're just in awe when you see the numbers.
November 17th, 2012. You mentioned it. 8 touchdowns for Taj Boyd, 62-48, the final score in that game. But the thing that really stands out to me, Richmond, when I think back to that time in Clemson sports history, they weren't this, monolith at the top of college football yet. They were still trying to not just overcome their in-state rival in the South Carolina Gamecocks, but they're just trying to say, hey, look at us. They didn't have the attention of college football just yet.
No, and a lot of people forget that whole period, basically from 2011 to 2015, that was a different Clemson team on a national perspective. You're right. This was not the team where we are now. It was in that building of the foundation. Remember in 2012, this is Chad Morris's second year. It's Brent Venable's first year. So there's a lot of things that are just being built with the foundation and the culture, that Dabo was building from that perspective. And this was just the beginning of some of these performances where people across the nation at least did start taking a little bit more notice of Clemson. And obviously here in the Southeast, a lot of Clemson fans and a lot of Clemson faithful would always say that Clemson's always been a national program, but in all reality, not true. And I say that with a little bit of, heartburn, because I want to believe that Clemson's always been a national program. But when you're looking at the pantheon of college football programs, Clemson really didn't take that step until after, the 2015 season. So again, this was the early days of really building that foundation.
As good as Taj Boyd was that day, Mike Glennon may have actually played a little bit better, especially through the air. I mean, Glennon threw for more yards. He threw for 5 touchdowns as well. I mean, this was an epic quarterback matchup. And not only that, but a matchup of tremendous runs by both teams.
And we always look at this game, the Textile Bowl, Clemson, NC State, is a game that is so unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, we've had some crazy games, and I know you can probably remember some of those games with Woody Dantzler against NC State. I mean, it's hard to predict, and it seems like this rivalry is underrated, in my opinion, in terms of it might not be so much that each school, has this disdain for each other, but for whatever reason, both schools can be thorns in each other's sides, basically. Because in 2011, Clemson was having a really good year, but they got face planted at NC State in 2011. So there was a little bit of a revenge factor going into this game, and nobody could have predicted that it was going to turn into almost like a basketball game where you have this game of run. Clemson goes up 13-0. You're feeling really good, feeling confident. And then all of a sudden, as you mentioned, Mike Glennon had a game. He goes on a 24-0 run. So it's 24-13 all of a sudden. And you're thinking, oh, my gosh, here we go again. NC State, how do we always have these type of games against NC State? And can Clemson now make some type of run? Well, and they did. They go on their own run of 42 unanswered points to take a 55-24 lead, which is just insane. And then you look at it, Lawton, the score finishes 62-48. Clemson scored 62 points in 3 quarters. They didn't even score in the fourth quarter.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Amazing the type of game this was.
Well, and I think about the fact that when you look back at these games, you mentioned that this was Chad Morris in year 2. This was also an era where Clemson, I think, thought, and Clemson fans thought, and maybe even the coaching staff thought, that in order to play football with the bigger boys, once you got into those games, we had to be fast-paced, hurry up, no huddle. You weren't necessarily going to be able to overpower people with ultra talent on the defensive line, perhaps, maybe even on the offensive line. You just had to be quicker and wear teams down, and that may be what you saw that night or in that ball game between the Tigers and NC State.
We definitely did, and remember, this was Brent Venable's first year as well, so he wasn't in a position that he had, the players that he wanted to be, so his defensive scheme might have not been exactly what he wanted to run because he didn't have the personnel to run exactly what he wants to, like he does now. And so I think it was this aspect. Okay, we're going to have to lean on the offense a little bit more and have these type of games where, all right, opposing team, you're just going to have to outscore us because we're going to be running and gunning. And I think that was what you saw in this game was just the combination of Chad Morris's offense and Taj Boyd at quarterback. And don't forget the weapons that Taj Boyd had around him as well. I mean, you had Andre Ellington, who rushed for over 100 yards in that game. You had Brandon Ford, who was coming on now as tight end to replace Dwayne Allen. He had over 100 receiving yards that game. And then throw in Sammy Watkins, Nuke Hopkins, and Martavis Bryant, and Adam Humphries. I mean, he had some weapons around him, so it was definitely, you could see just the culmination of Chad Morris's offense and those weapons. And it was on showcase that Saturday.
He is Richmond Weaver hanging out with us here on Clemson Sports Talk. We got a quick break coming up here in about 10 seconds. We'll put Richmond on hold, and we'll get back after it with him for a few more minutes talking about the Clemson Tigers and the series, Clemson's greatest games. I hope you've had a chance to watch them, so we'll talk with Richmond more right after this.
A grand in your hand.
That would help out a ton.
Winner.
Amazing.
After winner.
This will be very helpful.
After winner.
Definitely keep me going until I hopefully go back to work soon.
You could be next.
This helps a lot.
Your chance to win $1,000 is coming up.
Listen for your cue to text on Fox Sports Radio 1400.
Live from the $1,500 instant rebate AAA Heating and Air Weather Center.
Same story in weather. Warm again tonight with lows in the mid-70s. Hot tomorrow with highs mid-90s. For Channel 25 ABC Columbia, I'm Chief Meteorologist John Farley.
This report is sponsored by Compassion International.
We're all feeling the weight of COVID-19. But for kids in poverty around the world, things are becoming desperate. Join Compassion International and provide for a family in poverty. Make your one-time $40 gift. Text HOPE to 83393.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just got invited to the prom. Do you A, meet her date?
I need to see your past date report cards, your driver's license, a list of references, and this hair sample.
B, help her pick out a dress.
Don't you just love the long sleeves and turtleneck on this pantsuit?
Ugh.
C, attend the prom undercover.
Mom, what are you doing here?
I'm not Mom, I'm Calvin, the new kid at school.
Or D, capture her big moment.
Let's take a photo of you two. I'm in the middle.
When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers. But that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
You're not wired to have a response to this sound. You're neutral to it. You hear it every time you finish a meal and never feel anything. But if we were able to associate this sound with a new stimulus, save the food, we've achieved pulling a natural response from you. Save the food. Why are we doing this, you may ask? Save the food, because this ad is trying to change your after-meal behavior through brainwashing, because food waste costs the average family $1,500 a year. Save the food, cha-ching, and $1,500 extra bucks is like getting a pay raise. Save the food, cha-ching, you're promoted, which could pay for your child's braces. Save the food, cha-ching, you're promoted.
Check out my braces.
So when you hear this sound, rethink your behavior. Cook it, store it, share it. Just don't waste it. For tips and recipes, visit savethefood.com. Brought to you by NRDC and the Ad Council.
You wanted to see me?
Yes, please, have a seat. So here's the thing. When this company brought you on, we took a chance on you. You didn't have that 4-year college degree we typically look for.
Right.
But we gave you a shot anyway. And since then, you've worked incredibly hard and given it your all.
Thanks.
You've been an important asset to the team, but I don't think you can be an intern here anymore. We want to hire you.
You're serious?
Absolutely.
Find your next great employee. Introduce yourself to the grads of life. Who are they? Talent worth knowing about. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or even mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
I won't let you down.
I know.
Don't miss out on a resource many innovative companies have already discovered. Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Facts with a sprinkle of opinion. The Rundown with Rob, weekdays at 3 on Fox Sports Radio 1400.
Back at it on a Friday afternoon. Richmond Weaver with us here on the show that shakes the Southland, talking about Clemson's greatest games. The matchup coming up this weekend, NC State versus the Tigers, 62-48, the final score. Taj Boyd accounting for 8 touchdowns. Richmond, was this the best game ever statistically for a Clemson Tiger quarterback?
It's so hard to argue that. I mean, the numbers don't lie, Lawton. I mean, you can't look at those numbers and not say, okay, it has to be. If it's not the best performance, then it's got to be in the top 1 to 3 performances. Because again, just looking at what he was able to do in essence, 3 quarters of action. Because I mean, he comes out in the fourth quarter, he gets his over 100 yards rushing, but then he comes out. So there was a little bit of, they pulled off the gas, so to speak, in that fourth quarter, and so. From my perspective, I don't know how many other performances would be better statistically. Now, you can look at if you're winning a national championship. Okay, right. Now that's a different story, and having a game like Deshaun Watson did or Trevor Lawrence, from that standpoint. But just from a true statistical standpoint, you don't see many performances when at the end of the game and you're looking at the box score and you see 8 touchdowns accounted for one person. That's impressive.
Unbelievable. The Tigers at the end of that ball game, by the way, were 10-1.